What is the scariest thing that has ever happened to you? I had a heart attack at 25 years old on New Year's Eve while I was at home on my own. I wasn't really feeling well during the day, a bit like the flu, so I cancelled my plans. At about 10 at night, I started sweating uncontrollably, and within half an hour, I had this indescribable pain in my chest. Between the panic and the pain, I couldn't really do much. I absolutely thought I was going to die on my own on New Year's Eve. I somehow managed to dial 000, and for a final joke to the situation, I went into cardiac arrest at exactly midnight. That's pretty young for a heart attack. Was it coronary artery blockage? What was the outcome? This is my sister's medical specialty. Heart attacks in people that age are most often due to a genetic heart condition. She sees a lot of people who this happens to, and then they do genetic testing throughout the family and find other people who have the same risk but zero symptoms. Something I think about a lot is what if something happens to me while I'm alone, just like this? The thought of knowing that you are likely about to die and nobody is there for you to say goodbye to is terrible. It gives me chills just thinking about it. I got kidnapped by an ex-boyfriend who was weirdly obsessed with me when I was 16. He said he was 18 but was really 22. He tricked me into taking a ride in his new truck to a store that was a few blocks away. Instead, he drove out to the middle of nowhere and tried to rip off my clothes while screaming and crying at me. It got dark out, but he still wouldn't let me leave. I was convinced he was going to sexually assault me and then kill me in a panic, so I told him I loved him, but that my mom found out how old he was and made me break up with him. I said that I wanted to hide the relationship from her, but that it would be difficult to do if I wasn't back in time for curfew because she would ground me and take away my car. He was so ecstatic that he immediately took me back to my car. I hid from him for a few years, but ran into him at a gas station when I was 19. I swear I could feel my heart stop beating. Years later, I heard he was caught in an FBI sting for online predators and went to prison. God, I can't imagine being in this situation. Not just being kidnapped, but also thinking about the aftermath. This person has to be on edge and worried about this person doing something to her again whenever she goes out and never has peace of mind. Thankfully, he was caught, so I'm sure that was a huge relief. A robber got into my house when I was about 8. Luckily, my dog noticed and bit the guy's leg and wouldn't let go. My dad heard the commotion and ran downstairs to see the robber trying to go back over the fence. With my dog still attached to their leg, my dad had to pull my dog off this guy's leg because she wouldn't let go. Police were called, but the guy was long gone. Doggy is still alive to this day. A robber got into my place the very night I moved in. I had heaps of stuff: fishing and camping gear, tools, collectibles, and various other personal belongings, still in boxes, mostly in the double carport out back. The place was 3/4 fenced in, but one side had a somewhat dodgy wire fence. I heard my dog bark a couple of times at 2 in the morning, but I thought nothing of it at first. The burglar foolishly pried open the downstairs sliding door to be greeted by a very protective German shepherd, Pepsi, who was curled up on a futon. I had locked her inside that night, hoping to replace the side fence and just let her settle into her new home. She then let out a crazy growl and bark. It was not the usual, "Hey, there's a cat" type of bark either. I jumped up and ran downstairs, grabbing a big bamboo stick from behind the door. He ran and was going over the back fence as I heard him yell out a blood-curdling scream. She had latched on, pulling him back over the fence. As I got to him, I whacked him once with the pole, and then she adjusted and tore his Achilles out. He was on the ground and couldn't move, just screaming in fear and pain. My dog stood her ground and would have ripped him to shreds at the slightest signal. He had piled up a heap of stuff, maybe a dozen fishing rods, even a kayak and canoe over the back fence. He begged for me to not let the dog kill him. I said I'd call him an ambulance, but he pleaded to just let him go. I said there was no way he could walk. I told him to let everyone know this place was off limits. He managed to pull himself over the fence, crawling off into the night. He yelled in pain as he tried to walk. I figured he must have crawled at least 400 meters or more. Never had any trouble again. I feel like I say this every time dogs come up in a thread, But again, if you live alone or are worried about having protection and don't want to get a gun, at least get a dog and have them trained to be protective. It will give you peace of mind and you'll be a lot safer than with no protection at all. Not something that happened to me, but something I saw that will always haunt me. We lived on the corner of the street, and the house across the street on our right was also a corner house. Well, one day, that house caught on fire, because the lady living there decided it was a great idea to fall asleep with a candle on a wicker table, next to curtains. It was really bad. We saw the lady jump out the second-story window and make it across the street. Well, she left her children in the house. One by one, they jumped out the second-story window. 3 tiny little children. My eldest brother ran across the street each time and brought them back. Once the firefighters put out the fire, they went inside the window to check out the house. The firefighter came out carrying a dead, burnt-up child. He had his arms up as if he was pounding on a door. That was the most horrifying thing I have ever seen. At first, I thought the arms might be up due to the skin and muscles tensing up from rigor mortis. Sadly, that is not what happened. I don't know exactly what they're called, but these 2 houses are connected. Upstairs, there's a door that leads from one house to the other. The neighbors kept it locked because the woman's children always went through it. The boy was trying to get through that door, which is why his arms were up like they were. That's where they found him, up against that door. So sad. Jesus. I can't imagine the pure fear and despair that that child must have gone through in his final moments. This was truly terrible to read about. I have a question for you guys with kids. If there were a fire in the house, what would be your first course of action? Would you escape first and let the firefighters find your kids? I don't have kids, and I can't imagine being in this situation, but I would imagine most parents would go through their kids' rooms if they could before escaping. But then again, maybe she had no other way to go except out the window. Let me know in the comments. I have no idea if I was going to be murdered or robbed, but on New Year's Eve 2018, I was going home at like 1 in the morning. I met a couple crying at the subway station, asking to call the police because they got robbed. The woman seemed drunk. The cops told me they couldn't do anything and that they would have to go to the station the day after to file a report. I asked the couple if I could help them, and they said they lived somewhere close and it was on my way back home. So I helped get the girl up and she used my shoulder as we walked. After 10 minutes, where the girl was agitated and weird, I assumed due to alcohol, we were near a dark alley. The guy took a phone call, but it was in a different language so I couldn't understand him. The girl stopped, suddenly not drunk anymore, and cried to me, "I don't want to do this. I never wanted to do this. Please, please run. Go home and run. Don't stay here." She went back while grabbing her boyfriend, who was just screaming something like, "Hey, where are you going? Come back!" In the moment it felt weird, but the more I look back on it, the more I feel like I got very, very lucky that night. This is going to sound so sad, but this is the stuff right here that makes me very hesitant to help strangers out in public who appear to need help. I hear story after story of people stopping to help someone, and that person ended up getting robbed, kidnapped, etc. It's so sad that the world we live in now makes us question whether we should pull over and help that person standing by their car, or if you go help that person struggling to carry something, and their group of friends pops out of the bushes to take everything you have. Such a sick world. A man stalked me until he got my morning routine down. I would wake up at 5 in the morning, see my spouse off, work out in a detached garage for 2 or 3 hours, take our dog to the park, and then work in the garden or house until my spouse came home in the afternoon. That morning, my husband decided he wasn't going to work. He woke up before me and left me in bed to sleep in. When he let the dog out, he noticed the door to my workout room was open ajar, but didn't notice anything else wrong, so he closed it, called the dog, and came back inside to play video games. The guy had been waiting for me in my workout room. He had heard someone come out, so he checked the back door, and it was unlocked. He came into the house with his shoes off and his pants and belt undone, and had taken one of my knives from the kitchen drawer. When he rounded the corner to the living room, my husband and dog were there between him and me, sleeping nude with the door open in the bedroom. They were taken totally off guard, and the dog went into attack mode. My husband grabbed him and opened the door to get the guy outside and call the cops. Everything happened so quickly, and it could have all gone down so differently. This happened 8 years ago, but I often think, what if my husband hadn't randomly decided to stay home that morning? Here's a picture of the good boy. Yep, here's another story where a dog saves their owner from malicious people. Are you convinced to go adopt a dog yet? Seriously though, this is another thing that really freaks me out, and I feel sorry for people who live in countries or states where you are not allowed to defend yourself in a burglary. There are places where the owners would actually be criminally charged for defending their home and causing harm to the intruder. There are also places that mandate that you need to run away and leave your home. Like, are you kidding me? All of my hard-earned belongings are in that house along with my wife, pets and family, and you want me to run away? That's just absolute bullshit. It was the day after Christmas, 1998. I was 9. I was in the car with my mom, who was 36, and my cousin, who was almost 14. We were traveling out of state, about 10 hours, to visit my mother's parents and siblings, including my cousin's mother. His mom and dad were divorced and lived near us with his dad at the time. I got tired, told my mom I was going to take a nap, said I love you to both of them, and immediately fell asleep. Some undetermined amount of time later, I woke up and just heard a lot of noise. People, vehicles, sirens. Looking around, I couldn't tell what had happened. I was covered in blood that wasn't mine. I began to panic, and someone in white, it's all I can remember, and I assume it was a paramedic, came to me and told me to stay calm and that I would be okay. I was life-flighted out shortly after. We had hit a tractor-trailer parked on the side of the road. He had no signals out and it was kind of foggy. I was told he had weed in his system too. By the time my mom must have realized he was there, it was too late and the brakes gave out. 6 months later, there was a recall on that car for that exact thing. I won't go into gory details, but suffice it to say, my mother had a closed casket. My cousin died of internal bleeding. I almost died, but the doctor said the only thing that saved me was that I was asleep, so I was relaxed enough when we hit the tractor. The internal damage I suffered was life-threatening, but I was close enough to medical help that I survived. I can't think of a time I was more scared than in the back of that Lincoln Town Car. Somehow my young mind shielded me from the horror of what had happened to my mother, because I should have seen her. Doctors believe it's a trauma response and that I've blocked it. I have zero interest in unblocking that memory. Whoever that paramedic was, thank you. You were there to calm me down when all I knew was terror. I think you're a big reason I'm still here today. I'm sure what you witnessed haunts you, but that little girl you calmed down is beyond grateful. I hate hearing these types of stories, but it always helps me remember that it could happen to anybody. The best we can do is to stay as observant as possible. Cars are metal death traps. Be careful when you're driving. Never become complacent and always stay 3 steps ahead of your current position. I didn't mean for this to turn into a driver's education course, but seriously, if you f*** around in a car on a daily basis, you will eventually find out. And oftentimes, the person who is at fault is the one who survives. I guess the fact that they ruined a family and ripped a child's parents away from them is the type of guilt that can be worse than being the one who dies.